Hey there, everybody. Professor Cloud here with my very first top 5 of anything. The horror genre has been my favorite across pretty much any media type that you can think of, and that is definitely held true when it comes to video games. I dedicate 2 months of my year playing horror games from a streaming perspective, but I play horror games all the year round. So I have a very good understanding of not only what makes a good horror game, but also what makes a great horror game one that I would include in a top 5 list. As such, thanks to the prodding of someone that I work with, I thought that it was finally time for me to put together a top 5 list of my favorite survival horror games. These games are, in my opinion, the very best that are available, and no matter what their age, they are all playable today. You may even see me play them from time to time on stream, or even try to challenge them with a no damage run. So with that, let's get started with number 5. There are many people that would argue that Dead by Daylight does not belong in a survival horror top anything list. However, go play as any of the 44 survivors and then get chased by the Shape, aka Michael Myers, when his music is playing, and then try to tell me that DBD doesn't invoke the same intense feelings as the other games in this list. Dead by Daylight was one of the first horror games of its time, and 8 years later, it is still going strong. And even though I have upwards of 400 hours in the game, both on and off stream, I have no intention of quitting the game anytime soon. The primary mechanics of the game have not changed much over the last 8 years. You are either going to play as a killer chasing 4 survivors, or you're going to be chased. Even with that being true, Behavior Interactive has found a way to keep the game fresh and interesting for both the casual player or the more hardcore player, and all in between. I fall somewhere in the middle, and I love coming back to this game, because there are either fresh killers or survivors with fresh new maps, or most recently even, some new mechanics to check out. Let me show you what I mean. The first place to start when discussing Dead by Daylight is the roster that's available to you. No matter whether you prefer to play as killer or survivor, you will have more than 30 killers and more than 40 survivors to choose from. With more than 8 years in existence, Behavior Interactive has been able to put together a roster with crossovers from some of your favorite properties, both in and out of the horror genre. Now, some of my favorite killers are the ones that are what most people would call M1 killers, meaning that you're always going to attack with just your primary mouse button. But the great thing about these 32 plus killers or 30 plus killers is that every one of them plays just a little bit differently. They all have different mechanics, so you can find one or more killers that fit your play style, fit your interests, and then every single one of them have customizations. They either have full-on outfit customizations, such as what we've got here, or you can actually pick and choose specific body parts and things along those lines. So Michael Myers, the Clown, Death Slinger, but you'll see there's Pinhead right there. He's in here. There's Alan Wesker from Resident Evil. So there's a lot of great IP crossover. And then the same thing is true when it comes to the survivors as well. I talked about Michael Myers. There's Laurie Strode, the common protagonist of the main Halloween games. But there's many, many more. There's 40 plus of these. So this is a absolutely phenomenal roster, and Behavior Interactive is always adding to it. I actually enjoy playing as both killer and survivor, hence why I made sure to show you both rosters, which opens up my enjoyment even more. I've spent time playing both sides to learn both perspectives, because you really, in order to get good at the game, you need to understand how the survivors act, how the killers act. I've also spent a lot of time putting together builds for the different killers and survivors that I enjoy playing, and I've created some build-based videos for my channel that you can find in the DBD Highlights playlist. Don't get me wrong, with Dead by Daylight being a live service game, there is absolutely an opportunity for humanity to express itself in your games in both positive and negative ways, whether it be via chat or just by their actions on screen. However, the joy of being able to roll up on Ellen Ripley as the Xenomorph, or Laurie Strode as Michael Myers, or pretty much any killer rolling up on Nicolas Cage, it just can't be outdone. So let me show you a couple of clips of a killer match that I did, a survivor match that I did. The killer match is absolutely my favorite experience. I was playing as Michael Myers, dressed up as Michael Myers, and I was able to get all 4 kills in one match. So take a look at those quick clips, and then we'll move on to the next game in the list. Yeah, she's tunneling me like nobody's business. She is not happy with me at all. Finally gave up. Then again, maybe not. Oh, she's really not going to be happy now. Number 4.
Resident Evil.
When talking about Resident Evil, it can be difficult for some of us to choose just one game. So I didn't. Whether you are being dragged into and forced to have dinner with the Baker family in Resident Evil 7, or you are getting your first real look at the Lycans and having to deal with all of their fast movements in a very small area, just before being introduced to Urias, the former leader of the Lycans. All of this occurring in Resident Evil Village. Let's not forget about the all-important entrance into the village in RE4, where everyone gives you the warmest of welcomes. No matter which Resident Evil game is your favorite, I can say that I like almost the entire series, especially the main titles, the remakes, and even a few of the connected side games. Unlike other games in this list, the Resident Evil series gives you the ability to fight back against whatever may be the problem of the day. But the most unique reason that I enjoy the RE games is that Resident Evil 2 Remake is the first game that I was able to successfully complete the game without taking any damage. The RE games are very popular in the challenge running community, and I definitely enjoy that challenge in these games. A link to my RE2 no damage run with Claire can be found in the description below. Number 3. Some of the greatest horror games of the last 20 years are being updated, remastered, and remade. We saw a couple of them in the Resident Evil portion of this list, but the best one so far is definitely Dead Space, at least in my opinion. It all starts right from when you crash land on the Ishimura. The eeriness of the atmosphere is something that you will notice right from the get-go. One of the things that you should notice from these video snippets is that I turned on the film grain option within the game, which definitely adds to the experience in my opinion. I actually turn it on in pretty much every game that gives me the option. The original Dead Space still holds up very well, and I definitely recommend going back and playing it, but the best thing about the remake is the improvements that were possible to the combat, and specifically the limb removal. You can't survive on the Ishimura, let alone find out what's going on if you can't remove the limbs of the different necromorphs that you run across with your plasma cutter or other weapons of choice. As you continue through the Ishimura, repairing different systems so that you don't crash before being able to escape, you will quickly find out that the necromorphs are not actually your biggest problem. Enter in one of my favorite actors that was a part of making this game so great, as he portrays the maniacal Dr. Mercer, and Six, the indestructible hunter on you. I don't really want to tell you too much more about the game so that I don't spoil anything in case you haven't played it, but this should definitely give you a taste of what places this game in my top 5 of all time. The last thing to mention, as I talked about when discussing the Resident Evil series, I love challenge running horror games, and the Dead Space developers made this possible out of the box and gave you an achievement for accomplishing it. Enter in Impossible Mode. Make sure to check it out. It's something I still haven't achieved yet. Maybe you will. Number 2. Alan Wake is not going to be the most action-heavy game in this list, but it's definitely going to have the best story, as well as the most unique gameplay, especially for its time. Alan Wake is told in a very episodic way, trying to fit into a TV show style formula, which makes sense considering that Alan used to be a writer for a TV show. All throughout the game, you are either participating in an episode of the story, or you are watching an episode of a TV show that Alan wrote called Night Springs, or you are finding manuscript pages throughout the game that are part of a novel that Alan supposedly wrote. It is this completely unique way of telling this story and bringing all the pieces together that makes this game so interesting for me. I talked about the unique gameplay at the top, and when this game originally came out, it was definitely something that I had never seen before. All the enemies and bosses are shadow versions of themselves, with the shadow weaving itself throughout the story. The shadow acts as a kind of shield that must be destroyed before you can get rid of the enemy. In order to destroy the enemy, you must use a flashlight or other light source, which does get upgraded throughout the game, and then destroy the enemy directly using a conventional weapon. It definitely makes for some very interesting and complicated fight sequences, especially later in the game. Next thing to discuss is the care in which the game and its sequel have been put together. The voice acting is absolutely top-notch, which is exactly what you want from a game that is told in this way. The characters are all very interesting and have their own small stories that are woven into the mess that Alan finds himself in. My favorite to this day was Barry, as he adds a side of comic relief to such a dark game. Then there are the picturesque views. With the entire series taking place in the Pacific Northwest, Remedy Entertainment has found some absolutely beautiful areas of the game that are based on a beautiful part of the country. And with today's technology, it makes you feel like you're there. One final point that I would like to mention about the game is the soundtrack. The sounds throughout each of the episodes are great and definitely lend to the sense of dread that you feel when trying to find your wife. But the real masterpiece are the song choices that act as a closer for each episode in the game. Unfortunately, you're going to have to take my word for it because I can't play any of them without getting my video copyright claimed. Now, when I talk about Alan Wake being my number 2 game of all time, I'm especially referring to the original, and now its remaster. The sequel is a different topic for another day. Before we check out my number 1, let's check out an honorable mention. There are many of you that will not have heard of The Beast Inside, and had I not seen it played by one of my preferred content creators, I may not have either. However, I love this game, and I look forward to playing it again as it does have more than one ending. To make this as succinct as possible, the primary reasons why I enjoy this game are the story, the locations, and the puzzles. In fact, the puzzles are fantastic, and considering that you play as a code breaker that works for the CIA, this certainly does tie into the story. However, you also play as one of your ancestors that lived a couple of hundred years earlier in the same house. So you're exploring the storylines in both directions and how they connect and why you specifically are involved. Normally, I don't like switching timelines a lot in a game, especially when the game does it all throughout. But for some reason, I never minded it in this game because the story and locations were so well delivered. I know that I mentioned how great the locations were, but hopefully this segment will show that. And the outdoor areas are even better and more picturesque because, like Alan Wake, it takes place in the Pacific Northwest. I will though call out one negative, which is the combat. Thankfully, there isn't a lot of it, but there are times when it can feel frustrating. At the end of the day, this is a great survival game and one that I highly recommend. Number 1. In my opinion, Alien Isolation is the epitome of a survival horror game, and this should be evident from one of the first cutscenes when you get to see the Xenomorph for the first time. Unlike the other survival horror games in this list, you will have no ability to destroy your attacker. This game is all about survival, and the mechanics of the game certainly lend to that. However, the Xeno is not your only enemy on the Sevastopol. After more than 100 playthroughs of the game, I can tell you that there are many times when I would have much rather preferred the Xeno over the androids, or even worse, the other humans. As you are trying to survive from all of these different enemies while just trying to get off the station, you will get to see a truly alien experience. Many of the type of areas that you will need to traverse will definitely remind you of the areas that you saw in the first 2 movies, as this game does take place in between the two from a timeline perspective. Crawling through the vents or seeing the motion tracking cameras will definitely take you back to certain scenes that may have terrified you while watching the movies. You may be wondering how it is that you're going to survive all of the different hazards that await you. Thankfully, the game does give you the ability to craft and even provide you with different survival tools like the all-important flamethrower so that you can either distract or even scare away your enemies and therefore allow you to get to your next objective. A game like this would not be complete without some true Easter eggs for the fans of the movies in the Alien universe, like me. There are a number of them, and they really strike home how great the game is and how it is a spiritual successor to the films.
When we get back home, I want a meeting with a shipping coordinator. My usual science officer has been replaced. No reason given. The new guy is more than capable, I'm sure, but only getting 2 days' notice for this kind of thing is crazy. I'd just like an explanation. We'll be ready for our load when we get the call. Dallas, Nostromo Captain, signing off.
To give you a complete picture of how much I love this game, I have not only played this game many times, but I have done no damage runs of this game and even created a guide for how to complete each mission without taking damage. It is extremely hard to accomplish. This game should be considered a definite recommend for all gamers, period, no matter whether you like survival horror or not. Thank you everyone for watching my very first top 5 video. Hopefully you enjoyed my list or maybe even got interested in a game that you haven't played before. Down below in the description you will find a number of links to videos and playlists of mine that I mentioned throughout the video. Thank you very much for watching, and if you did enjoy the content, please make sure to hit the like button and or the subscribe button. Hopefully I'll see you next time.